Welcome, everybody, to the Pokerfuse podcast. This is episode 9, coming at you on March 21st, 2019. One day after the spring equinox.
Wow.
Nick, how did... you didn't know that,
I
huh?
didn't know.
Well, it is the start of a new season, even though it is not the start of a new Pokerfuse podcast season. Nick, how's it going?
I'm feeling very ill-prepared this episode, Mike.
Oh, come on. You're never ill-prepared, so I don't believe it.
So normally I put aside a few minutes' time just to get ready, do the show notes and stuff. Right at the start of me getting prepared, I discovered that somebody was wrong on the internet, and I had to correct them.
All right, so it sounds like there's a story behind this one. Let me.
So I'm browsing 2+2, and I see that there's a thread discussing the revamped Stars rewards coming, which is something that we're going to be talking about in the first segment of this podcast. Yep. That's called foreshadowing in the industry, so just getting that in there. So I'm just reading that thread, and I see, obviously, the thread very quickly devolves into people saying that online poker is dead, PokerStars is destroying online poker, and I see somebody saying PokerStars online poker has been in constant double-digit decline year over year. So obviously this person is not a listener of the Pokerfuse podcast. I believe it was last week or the week before that we discussed the Stars Group's numbers. I don't know if you look at the analytics, Mike, but it tells me that we do not. There are one or two people out there who do not listen to the podcast currently. So understandable that he might need educating on this topic. I think that's very easy. Just hit the reply button. Just type in online poker at PokerStars grew 1.1% in 2018, 3.7% in 2017. They did not come off the cuff. I didn't know those numbers. I had it all up in front of me because I'm writing a bunch of reports on this very topic. So I thought I'd just dash that off. Issue over with.
But
let's just look at the timestamps. 12 minutes later, Anchev, who is a 12-year veteran of 2+2, he replies to me. Firstly, he suggests that I might be long on the Stars Group, that I held share in the Stars Group. And then he says, in reply to my online poker group on Wednesday in 2018, he said, I don't know where you get your numbers from. I prefer using official documents. He then puts in a screenshot of the PokerStars slide deck from their last quarterly performance. So it's quite the opening salvo here from Anchev. He quotes, obviously, quarterly Q4 revenue numbers, which do show that it did decline in Q4, as we discussed, I think, last week. And then he said, stop reading PR statements, start reading and understanding financial reports.
Ooh.
So, yeah. So,
I wonder if he knows to the depth that you read financial reports.
I had to reply, obviously, and this is why I have absolutely no preparation for this podcast. I had to reply bullet point by bullet point, talking about their revenue figures over every quarter, where these number comes from. It takes me a good 20-25 minutes, but I feel vindicated at the end of it, thinking that I've basically won the argument, Mike. But can you imagine what happened just 6 minutes after my very long post?
Why don't you tell me?
He replies and says, and I didn't expect this at all. I got completely played because he says, I know you're very experienced in finances, much more than me. You're probably correct in most of your statements. I'm here just to troll like everybody else. Isn't that what 2+2 is for? I've just been trolling. So he was trolling me the whole time, Mike.
Fair play. I mean, isn't that what 2+2 does, right? 2+2 is going to 2+2.
I fell into the trap. Now I did reply, the old get called out on your bullshit and then claim you're trolling the whole time. But no, I was outplayed there. Check raise there on the river, totally unexpected. So.
Well, it was very entertaining to hear the process that you went through, even though that may result in you being a little less prepared for this podcast.
Yeah, well, with all that in mind, why don't you take us through the segments of the week?
Probably unbeknownst to most people, there was a change this week implemented by the Stars Group, aka PokerStars, to their reward system. The reason that many people may not know about it is because it was exclusive to Italy. As part of what we suspect is their Stars Rewards 2.0 program. They've made some changes in that country with regards to their rewards, and they are things that maybe will not translate exactly to rest of world over the course of 2019, but definitely give us some hints as to what we might be able to expect.
Yeah, so Italy's quite often used as a test bed for changes these days because it's their largest segregated market. So the Italian player pool is separate from the rest of Europe, separate from the Spanish, French, Portuguese market, and obviously separate from the .com market. So it's a good place today for them to kind of test out these changes. We knew that they were going to be implementing this big update. I mean, they've been talking about it for about a year, like in their investors' calls and stuff. And about a month ago, they said that this upgrade was going to be coming this year with the main goals that they want to make. I forget the term they use. They want to make the opening of the chests more of an event, I think they said. Is that right?
Yeah, more meaningful.
More meaningful, right. Yeah. So we're seeing that now in what they've implemented in Italy, where the value of the chest has gone up significantly, but then the difficulty in earning these rewards takes a lot longer.
Right. So I think one of the biggest changes that we've seen is something that you could say maybe was inspired by what we saw from Run It Once. So they've taken their high end, their ceiling of their chests and their low end, and they've kind of condensed that a bit. So instead of, I think it was, and what is the proper term when saying cents in euros?
Cents.
Is it also called cents? Yeah, okay. So I think the bottom end of the range was about 7 cents on their chests, on the red chests previously in Italy, and is probably still the case rest of world, where they have now raised that up to a minimum of 50 cents, therefore making each chest opening more significant. And then they've taken the top end and reduced that down from 1,000 euros to, I believe, 700 euros in the new black chest.
Yeah, and obviously, so it's going to be cents in Italy, but presumably it's going to be, it'll be dollars when it comes to the .com market. But we expect to see the same thing. So they've removed the absolute low tier, which was the red. They've removed the absolute top tier, which was platinum. Now they've got the blue at the bottom and the black at the top. But yeah, so in addition to obviously being more valuable, so opening is a bit more exciting, which is definitely, I think, from it launched was something, I think, quite clear that it's perhaps a bit surprising it's taken this long to change, and that particularly in this world where we have, a lot of people streaming their play on Twitch, it becomes almost a chore to be going and opening your chest to find out that you've won, 10 cents or a ticket or something like that, which is obviously the last thing that you want if this is meant to be your reward for achieving a level and cashing it in.
Yeah. I think a lot of the biggest question that most people are going to have is, does this equal more or less rewards? And unfortunately, we don't have the data to be able to determine that. So along with the value of the chests, the frequency has also been tweaked. And with a lot of that stuff being opaque, it's hard at this point to be able to determine if the total amount of rewards that are being distributed has gone up, down, or remained the same. Yeah,
it would be very surprising if in aggregate they were giving away more under the system. There's no suggestion that this is going to be a more generous system rather than just more engagement. I could be wrong, but I expect they would be talking about that if that were the case.
Right, that's a really fair assumption, and I have the same view. If they did increase it, that would definitely be leading their marketing push in Italy, and thus far we haven't heard any indication that there has been an increase in the amount of rewards.
Yeah, and I think it'll be a case that people will need to play with the system and then work out for themselves. Obviously, the system is personalised. How long it takes to earn a chest is personalised, and that changes as you progress through the tiers. So, it'll be a case that people have to play and find out.
Yeah, actually, I think that is one of the other changes that they made as well, that the requirements to complete a chest have gone back to a month-long period, a rolling, I think it's 28 or 30-day period, where it used to be tied to a single session. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're testing the extremes of my knowledge here on the system. You're absolutely right that the new one is, I'm just reading here from the exclusive article on Pokerfuse.com if you'd like to read more that we published earlier this week. But yeah, we have here that players no longer have to earn 4 chests in a day. So instead, players move up to the next tier of this 6-tier system by earning 10 chests over a 28-day rolling period.
Well, yeah, that's also a significant change. And beyond what is happening in Italy, I think it's interesting to speculate on how these changes will be rolled out to the rest of the world. I would assume that there is going to be some mechanism in place on the part of PokerStars to gauge or evaluate how these changes have been received by players before they make any determination as to when and where these changes will be implemented globally.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they could be just testing it initially from a technical perspective, but absolutely they could be going to be trying it for a longer period of time in one market to ascertain how consumers respond to this change. I would be shocked if something very similar to this doesn't roll out globally. It seems like such an obvious change on paper. It seems to correct. I was going to say it seems to correct a lot of the criticism. It doesn't, because I think most of the criticism is it doesn't pay out enough money like it did, like it used to, and that's not going to change.
And that it's not transparent.
And that it's not transparent, and that's certainly not going to change. But it will correct the problem. I think that something that I like to always reference in this when these conversations come up is that I remember soon after Stars Rewards launch that somebody released a software tool that will automate the process of opening the chests for you, so you don't have to go through the arduous task of doing it yourself. And I think if you ever have that, then you've probably got a problem in your system. And right. In fact, something else that I think they've got, correct me if I'm wrong, is that they're introducing a cash out now system where you can cash in on the value of a partial reward.
Right, partial progress, right. So if you are in the progress or the process of obtaining the next level and you realize that you're not going to be able to play enough to complete that level, you can trade in your progress as long as it's past a certain threshold for the lower chest that you had just completed. So that I think a lot of players will find that even though it may seem like a small tweak, I think that's going to be pretty well received.
Yeah. So Stars Rewards 2.0, expect that to roll out to the .com market and the European markets in the coming weeks to months. Doesn't go many weeks on this podcast where we don't discuss a potential new game that's going to be launched on PokerStars, and this week is going to be no different because on Pokerfuse this week, another little exclusive is that we expect PokerStars to release a UFC-themed Spin Go game very soon, probably in the next few days to weeks.
Yeah, it's not exactly clear what it's going to be when it comes out, but we do expect to see it rather soon, as you just mentioned. It could be a new Spin and Go game. It could be relegated to maybe just a particular promotion around the new partnership that the UFC has formed with PokerStars. And there's also speculation that it may include knockout.
Yeah, I think this is just
format.
Yeah, I think this is just our guess from looking at kind of the image assets that we see. So a bit of backstory here is that PokerStars signed a partnership deal with the Ultimate Fighting Championship in December 2018 to sign up as their, in quotes, official poker partner. Nothing has come of that partnership, I believe, until this game. I'm not sure if their brand has been presented at UFC fights. Yeah,
that I would not know. I'm not a follower of the UFC, so I don't. That's no excuse. I should know. I'm a follower of online poker industry, so I should know if PokerStars is advertising at UFC events. But I guess I just don't.
Yeah, and we do know that there hasn't been anything on the product side tying in with this UFC, and again probably showing our lack of UFC knowledge here. I'm not sure if a big match or something is coming up in it's probably a bout, isn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say match. Yeah. All right. Is it on the pitch?
Yeah. So potentially it could be tying in with that, but from what it looks like, there is going to be maybe a limited edition Spin and Go, being that the table is octagon in shape, which is the shape of the UFC pitch. We also speculate that potentially this could be a four-handed game just because that would look quite nice and symmetrical on the table. I mean, it could be eight-handed, obviously.
That would be a shocker.
Yeah, it was. So PokerStars have Spin Go Max, which is randomly 3 to 8 players. So they do have the capacity. They have done eight-handed. I think 8 as a standard Spin Go game isn't particularly fun. I think it takes away from... I mean... they're so quick anyway that eight-handed there's very little interplay between players. So I'd be surprised if they launched a format that was 8 a fixed amount. So 4 seems like it makes sense, and obviously guessing that there might be a knockout component just to fit in with the theme of a UFC fight.
That does sound interesting. It sounds like it could potentially be something that's popular. I know there are a lot of UFC fans out there, and there is a considerable amount of crossover between the two industries as well, I think. We have Jason Somerville, a big UFC fan. We have Terrence over at the Dat Poker podcast, who actually doesn't fight for the UFC, but he is a MMA fighter. And we also saw... it was the very first online poker company in the U.S. was Ultimate Poker, which was associated with... UFC, I believe, right? Ultimate, okay. I've got those companies straight. Cool. So there is some connections between the two industries, and I expect that the poker community, poker fans, and even UFC fans will find the new partnership and the crossover between the products to be interesting, and hopefully it will be a success.
Yeah, it's interesting. If it is four-handed and it does have a bounty component, we have seen exactly that spread by Party Poker in the past when they first launched.
Wait. So we have PokerStars copying Party Poker? Isn't it usually the other way around?
Well, let's wait and see. But when Party Poker first launched their lottery sit and go, their jackpot sit and go format, it was called Sit and Go Hero. And it was four-handed, and at the start of the game, one person at that table had a bounty put on their head, and so players would fight over both that bounty and the primary kind of jackpot, which I thought was a really, really interesting format. They had it for, I want to say, a couple of years, and then in the European markets, they launched a more traditional game they called Jackpot Sit and Goes, which was just three-hand, and they removed the bounty component, and they recently, in the .com market, scrapped both. I think they had both Hero and Jackpot, and they rebranded it as Spins, which is very much a nod at kind of PokerStars' name for the game, and just they restyled it and they made it just three-handed and removed the bounty portion. So it would be fascinating to see if PokerStars then, kind of came back with a four-handed game with a knockout component. I think it's a really interesting format, so it wouldn't be... I don't think it will be a foolish move, and obviously it fits in with the theme really well. So it's interesting to see what happens there.
Another game that is that we're seeing here, another new poker variant is, well, it's really not a new poker variant because it was introduced a few months back, is 6+ Hold'em. And the interesting thing that has happened with 6+ Hold'em is just today it was launched in the Italian market. And we had been suspecting that it was about time for it to be replaced as it was running its course. But the launch in Italy seems to signify that maybe this one isn't going away.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. This is the first time in since they've started creating these novelty cash game formats. This is the fourth in a year that they have put one of them through the steps required to launch it in a regulated European market, which requires specific approval from the regulator to do. So they didn't do that with Fusion or Split Hold'em or Unfold. Yeah, that's the other three. They have done it with 6+ Hold'em, which we've been talking about for a while. We knew that they were seeking that approval, and it certainly shows that they put more value in the longevity of this game over the other formats. With that said, we're also sitting here expecting them to remove 6+ Hold'em from the .com market because we think they will be launching Split Omaha soon, which is a game we talked about 3 or 4 weeks ago on this podcast. Yeah,
and so it'll be interesting to see if they actually run side by side two of these new poker variants. 6+ Hold'em was launched on January 16th, so we're, 65 plus days? Something around there, right?
Yeah. And these games have always lasted in the region of 55 to 65 days.
Yeah.
So
it's about time for it to expire if it is going to expire. That being said, there was plenty of speculation because of the popularity of the game that when it first came out, that it was going to be permanent and not temporary. I know that since then there have been press releases that have indicated that it is still a temporary game, but it'll be interesting to see if it sticks around past next week, because if it's not gone by Monday, that will have been the longest that any of the 4 variants or 5 now with 6+ Hold'em have lasted in the client, and could be an indication that it's here for a longer haul.
And we both have said, like, can't believe that they haven't launched it for tournaments yet.
And that would be the interesting thing. And we were speculating in the back room of the Pokerfuse headquarters over here about why they haven't done that, if indeed they are going to make it a more permanent game. And I was speculating that perhaps it was bottlenecked with development, that maybe there was more development needed to implement this game into the tournament format than into cash games. But some of the feedback that I've gotten from you and Anaj seem to indicate that a lot of the components that would be required already exist in other MTT formats, so that may not be the case.
I don't see that being an issue, really. I think it's probably more a marketing thing than anything, that if you want to launch a new game, you want to do it with a bit of a marketing push, a bit of a promotional push, make sure your ambassadors are there playing, make sure you've got like a big ticket tournament and get people filling seats. So maybe it's a case they want to wait for the Sunday Million Anniversary Edition. Maybe they think the format doesn't work particularly well in tournaments. And again, maybe their data shows that this game has not been a success, and they are going to be switching it out, and maybe they started the process in Italy and they're going to follow it through, but ultimately it is just going to be a game that only runs temporarily, and it's part of their portfolio of games that they switch in and out. We'll just have to wait and see, I guess.
Last week we discussed the Global Poker Awards, which were announced just prior to us going on the air, or the day before. We talked with GPI President Eric Danis, discussed some of the things that they are going to be doing new this year. And it seems over the past week, as the nominees were announced, as well as the categories, that there's been quite a buzz floating around the poker community. Nick, what have you seen people talking about with regards to the Global Poker Awards? I'll tell you
what I've seen, and what I've been talking about is that neither me or you is shortlisted for Journalist of the Year, so it's an absolutely massive snub.
And that's it. We're not talking to those guys anymore. Anyone that was on the panel, you guys are excommunicated.
Yeah. Did you vote for me?
I did. I actually did. Yeah. I can tell you, and I am not, and I don't know if it's officially a vote or a nomination. I'm not sure. But the 2 people that were on my list were you and Steve Ruddock.
Yeah, I voted for Steve Ruddock as well. So, so broadly speaking, there's definitely been a lot of discussion on Twitter. A lot of people have criticised those who have been shortlisted. Some of that blame goes to me and you and the other 130 whoever people who picked from a very long list of suggested people under each category. There was also write-in section, so absolutely. And I definitely, I did a write-in and suggested Ramon Collier should win an award, forgetting that obviously the PSPC was in January 2019 and it was not 2018. So me and you and everyone else should take some blame for some of the people on this nomination list. People have criticised, in the vlogger category, we have Doug Polk, who didn't release a vlog in all of 2018. Jason Somerville is shortlisted for streamer, and he took a real step back from streaming in 2018. And if you want to read more about people's opinions on that, there is a lot of discussion on Twitter. There are good articles by Donnie Peters at Pocket Fives. He wrote an article up, and you said you saw a piece from Lee Davey on Canada.
Yeah, so of the the critiques that I have seen, and I haven't seen a lot. I did read through Donnie's piece. I did not listen to the Fives podcast yet. That I think they discussed some of the issues in depth there. But Lee Davey did publish an article with what I thought was just a fantastic idea. As you pointed out, there's some responsibility to be had here on the nomination panel, and what Lee had suggested is that there be multiple nomination panels with expertise in particular categories. And I think anything other than that is really putting too much onus on the nomination panel, because there is such a wide variety of topics covered with these awards. I think it's unrealistic to expect some people to have that in-depth of knowledge in every category to be able to properly nominate.
Yeah, or at a minimum, encourage people to not vote in categories that they're not confident on. I'm not sure if it was actually possible to submit it and leave some blank. It certainly wasn't suggested you could do that. So I filled out all of them, but I would have been more than happy to have left a bunch of them blank for ones that I was, not particularly knowledgeable on. As you say, like there is a huge. I mean, there's a category like Best Mid-Stakes Poker Tour, and I hadn't been to a single one. And this was another issue I think I had with voting, was it didn't really say how to decide. Like, how do you decide what's the best poker tour? Are we looking at turnout? Are we looking at how well they've been run? And as I say, like, no one had voted for them would have been to all of them to be able to judge which is best. And even when it came down to, say, the poker journalists, so the four that we've got shortlisted, we have primarily a photographer, a head of content at Poker Central. We have a live reporter.
Yeah,
but
I'm not even sure who made the final.
You have a big range of different jobs, all falling under the fairly indescriptive title of journalist, which I'm not sure if any of those four would actually call themselves that as a job title. Perhaps a better example is content. So we have best content, and in the long list that we were choosing from, you've got everything from, and in the short list there is a photo, a book, and an article, and I think a Poker Central video or video series. I mean, how am I meant to judge which is the better content, a book or a video?
I agree with you wholeheartedly here, and you're kind of hitting on the thing that hits closest to home for me, in that there's many aspects actually that you just talked about. So for one, yes, these photograph, that absolutely 100% deserves its own category by itself. Yeah. We should pick the best poker photograph of the year every year. And to lump all these things in together, to me, just makes no sense whatsoever. And the same can be said about long-form feature articles. Or the same could be said about aggregate news coverage. I mean, because, for example, you can't pick one news story and say, this was the best news story of the year, unless it was an exclusive or a scoop that someone got, and then I could see that. But overall, these are very separate categories, and if our intent is to recognize and award people in our industry, then I think we should do that. And instead, it feels like we've lumped everybody together and are just going through the motions. Yeah, and so I should actually say a couple of positive things here, because I think that was presumed, but we haven't said it. But I think an awards show in general for the industry is an excellent thing to have. I think bringing together the American and European Poker Awards completely makes sense, and a lot of people have explained in detail why. But the industry is entirely global, and deciding who is in what continent, it makes no sense. So having one is very good. I think it's a fantastic thing for PokerStars to come on as the sponsor of this event. I think it's a great thing to have, and I think a lot of the criticism will hopefully shape it moving forward. This felt very last minute, I'll be honest, in that it was announced that it was happening. A couple of weeks later, there's an email saying, okay, you have to vote on to do it properly would have taken a lot of work. I think the timeline was like 5 or 6 days to get it turned in, and now obviously the event is
3 weeks away in Las Vegas, and everyone who's nominated is apparently flying out there. So hugely last minute. I think it would make sense either at the beginning of the year or midway through the year, rather than during the World Series of Poker, rather than in March, April time.
It's so. I want to also make sure that I present my balanced opinion in that, yes, I think this is a very good thing to have. I don't want my criticism to overshadow the appreciation that I have for GPI and Eric Danis and the people that are putting this together and making this happen, because I do think that it is not only a very good thing for our industry, I think it's a necessity. I think that it gives some legitimacy to the work that people do day in and day out, and also to the industry as a whole. That being said, I don't share the same criticism that a lot of people, that I've seen a lot of people put out there, that the responsibility or that the fault lies largely with the nomination panel. I think that this is something that needs to be corrected from the top. I think what you touched on as far as not having criteria for a specific category, that allows people to pick and choose different things, but I think we would be better served if that was specified up front and we had a very specific idea of what it is we're trying to accomplish with each particular award. Who are you trying to recognize? So I would definitely like to see more structure, more criteria put forward as far as nominations and votes go. I think that would be definitely something that we'd want to see. Another thing that I am not quite sure on, and so this is not meant as a criticism or an accolade, I guess, or a compliment, but more something that I think we should question, and that is sponsorship. So if we're talking about an award show that's going to recognize the industry, does it make sense to have a company like PokerStars sponsoring this? In this particular instance, I think it does. I think that there is, in the beginning, there's enough momentum that needs to be generated, and I think the only way to do that is through big sponsorship dollars, so I understand that one. I think, though, I do have a bit of a problem with having sponsored awards. There is one company that is out there that is the sponsor of one of the awards, and it's a company that is, has people up for the award, for different awards, for example. To me, there's just a feeling there of I would prefer there's some separation. I don't know. I think maybe it rubs me in a way that it makes me skeptical.
Well, I mean, I think another issue that we both have is that it's very focused on live.
Or another way to put it is completely devoid of anything about online poker.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting, isn't it? It's a point that you brought up before. That the streamers, we have a category for streamers, and obviously what they're doing is streaming online poker, but that's kind of as close as we get to online poker in the awards at all. Right.
Yeah. So I mean, there being no online poker awards at all, I can hear the argument that, this is meant to be focused on live. Well, number one, it's not specified that it's meant to be focused on live, and number two, you have the streamers category, and people are not at the Rio streaming the final table of some event that they're playing in the World Series of Poker. This is online poker that they're streaming, and I think that there's really a big blind spot missing when it comes to that part of the industry.
If you looked at the long list, there was absolutely, in categories, you had a fair amount of kind of online presence. In the sense of, in the journalist category, there were, take Steve Ruddock, for example. He writes about, the online industry and online gaming regulation. But if you look at the shortlist, it's almost entirely live. And I think that shows that the vast majority of the 130 or so people who, in the nomination panel, their focus is probably on the live. So they're just more familiar with the names of Poker News live reporting team than, say, Steve Ruddock, which is a shame because, and then I don't know, again, as you say, if it was the global live poker awards or whatever, then that's understandable. And maybe, I would want to add in, best online poker room, up and coming, best promotion, best online tournament series, just as like you have best mid-stakes live series, best software development, that kind of thing, which you see in some of the industry awards but aren't covered at all here. And maybe that's too broad for this award show.
See, I don't think so. There's easily a dozen online categories that are as deserving, if not more so, than a lot of the ones that are already out there. You can't tell me that, Online Poker Operator of the Year isn't deserving next to something like mid-stakes live tournament series, tournament director, whatever. That's another. How do you judge how good a tournament director is on a year-by-year basis?
Yeah, and so similarly, we have and this is where you definitely get blurred lines. So there is kind of top poker executive. And I know on there, say, Eric Holreiser, who's head of poker marketing at PokerStars, is on that list. But he sat there next to Rob Young and Ty Stewart and Seth Polanski. I'm thinking I don't have the list in front of me. But I mean, they just have completely different roles. And if it's just a live poker awards, then what are some of these online people even doing on the kind of the nomination list? Because, and so I don't think any of them made it through to the shortlist, really.
But yeah, and that's the area where I think that having criteria for each category is going to overall serve the awards well. You
know what? And maybe we can finish on this point. But I think that the fact that I think we just spoke quite passionately about it for 10 minutes. I've listened to the the Fives podcast from Pocket Fives. They had talked about it for half an hour, and their podcast is normally only 40 minutes, and it took up their podcast run an hour. So many Twitter threads about it, news articles about it, forum threads about it, shows that people really want an awesome awards show, that there is a real desire to see it. They're never going to get it right first time. I think it's quite a bit off the mark this time around. But the fact that there is so much response to it shows that there's a demand for people to see it, and it can only kind of get better and move in the right direction. Yeah, I agree. It'll be something that I will be looking forward to see how it turns out, and I'll also be looking forward to next year and the changes that are implemented. All right, well, that wraps it up for this week. I think we got pretty in-depth and even passionate on some topics. Nick, any special plans for the weekend? I feel passionately that I'm not going to go on the 2+2 poker forums for the remainder of the week. I think that's probably a good idea. Correcting people on the internet doesn't sound like a fun activity, especially if it's going to be a nice and sunny spring weekend in the UK. So I hope you enjoy it. I hope everyone else enjoys their time away from the tables as well. And we will see you next time.